Hello, everybody. Tay Sky here. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast and welcome to day 4 of my 10 days of worth. We are a little under halfway there. How are you enjoying it so far? I've been getting really awesome messages on Instagram about how this series has motivated you, has supported you, has just felt right. The content, the things that I've been sharing, landed in your heart in a way that's been very meaningful, that has allowed you to look at yourself and look at the world a little differently. And I'm all for this. So thank you for all of you who have reached out and let me know how much this series has resonated with you. If you haven't reached out, please reach out. I love hearing from you. It makes me feel like maybe I'm not alone talking to a mic in my living room, that maybe there are people out there that are listening. You are also welcome, by the way, to leave a review on iTunes. That shit really helps to get the podcast seen. You can also support the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/TaySky. There's so many ways that you can support this work if you feel like this work is resonating with you. Anyway, today we're at day 4, which is quite an exciting day because day 4 is all about the masks that we wear that fuels our unworthiness. So we're going to be talking about the 3 masks of unworthiness, including the one that like women tend to wear most of all. You'll see what I mean when you listen. We're also going to be diving into comparators. We're going to be talking about why we compare ourselves to others and why there's actually a difference between just comparing and comparators. I'm going to explain what comparators is and how it stems from the worthiness wound. And I'm going to start diving a little bit into this idea of attachment theory, which is one of my favorite ways of understanding relationships, understanding ourselves to the world. It's something that I teach in depth in Worthy Women Rise because it has such good substance and such a good way of helping us understand how it is that we understand the world. Now, as you notice, all of the topics that I share in a 10 days of worth are quite heavy, right? We're talking about things like comparators and people pleasing and perfectionism, things that we would rather really not talk about. To be honest, I think most of us would much prefer to spend our time doing things like quote unquote positive thinking, think happy thoughts, talk about what we want rather than what we don't want. I get it. I hear you. And I also have some news for you. If we're really truly to become the full, embodied, happy, alive woman that I think all of us craves to be, we have to integrate the parts of ourselves that there's a lot of shame around and embarrassment around, the parts of ourselves that do compare, the parts of ourselves that has a really hard time connecting to other people, the parts of us that we would rather pretend didn't exist. We do have to integrate those parts into ourselves in order for us to be whole. And that's why I consider this work shadow diving or shadow work or exploring the shadows. Shadow work is a concept created by Carl Jung, who is a famous psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, psychologist. He talked about shadow work as the parts of ourselves that we would rather cast off. And the importance of shadow work, as I've just said, is that it is integral to our integration. So I know that these words, please, that these subjects that I'm going to be sharing, that I have shared in the past 3 days and that I'm sharing in the future 6 days, is not necessarily the lightest things in the world. However, I promise if you can stick through this, there is craziness to my method. This is what I tell the women of Worthy Women Rise all the time. The way that I've developed Worthy Women Rise is for every single module to build off of one another. But at first, the women are like, I don't get it. I don't get how each of these pieces connect. And I always tell them, listen, you don't have to trust me. I'm still gaining a trust. Like, you don't have to trust everything I say. Just trust the process. Trust that this process is going to work for you and watch it unfold for you. And then by the end of the program, every single one of them is like, I totally get it. And I so get how each of these sections, just like what I'm sharing with all of you here in a 10 days of worth, each topic comes together in a really beautiful way to help us navigate our unworthiness, our worthiness wound, so that we can really be who we want to be, feel more alive, have more laughter and joy and fulfilling relationships and meaningful jobs and purpose and vitality and all of that good stuff. Okay, so stick with me. I'm really excited to share today's 2 videos with you through these audios. Again, reach out. Let me know how this resonates with you. We are going to take a break over the weekend, but I'll be back on Monday with day 5. All right? Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter. I am your host, Thais Sky, international speaker, teacher, and a certified life coach currently working to become a licensed psychotherapist in the state of California. Join me here every week as I offer thoughts and interviews on what it means to reclaim your humanness in this messy world. Today's topic is super good, like super juicy. Like this information absolutely can revolutionize our understanding of our unworthiness or the worthiness wound and how it stems and how it plays out in our lives. So you're in for quite a treat. So today we're talking about the 3 masks of unworthiness and why we wear them. Now, this is something that is true for every single person on this planet. And I know that's a bold statement, but it's just human psychology. It's how we've developed. It's how we've coped with our childhood. It's how we've stepped into adulthood. And now it's our responsibility to start to look at them and start to unravel the ways that we wear masks in the world. So when we were little, we were taught that being loved equals being good and holy. If you were perfect, if you were the good girl, then you received love. If you acted in accordance to whatever it is that your parents, your caregivers wanted you to do, you would get love. And because love is such a driver for children, children would do anything to receive love. And they quickly learn that there are parts of who they are that was not going to guarantee them love. Like wanting to hit their sister or the impulse to lie or cheat. So some of this is good, but it's also very much part of our natural psychology to have thoughts, to have desires, to have impulses that are negative, that don't fall in line with the good girl construct. And so we were not taught what to do with this part of us that's very real and very good. It's an important part of us. But we didn't know what to do with it. So we stuffed it inside. And what we did instead is we hid much of our real selves from the world, from our caregivers, and instead contorted our being to be who we thought our parents wanted us to be, to receive love and attention. But here's the problem. As we grew older, this defense mechanism, the way that we've learned to cope, the way that we've learned to navigate life, we actually started to identify as that way. So we started to identify as the masks that we wear. So now our responsibility is we have to look at the ways that we're wearing these masks, and we have to learn what, how to cultivate safety without those masks so we can drop the masks. The masks and the idealized self-image that we talked about yesterday and the day before yesterday, they're the same thing. So they're an ideal of who we should be. And, when we are wearing these masks, we're not being true to ourselves. And so that's a problem, right? Because as long as we're operating in the masks, we're fueling our feelings of unworthiness, because we're essentially saying who we truly are is not acceptable, including the negative impulses or the bad impulses or whatever you want to judge or label them, including the traits of the lower self. So now that we've attached ourselves to these masks as our identities, it's challenging for us to know that, well, actually, this isn't just who I am. This is who I've learned to become. And now I want to get to the root of who I am. It becomes challenging because we fool ourselves. And that's why it's so important that we continue to do the investigative work, like we talked about yesterday, to get curious. Let's talk about, and here's what's interesting. When we put on these masks, we're developing a sense of fake confidence. It's the type of confidence that wavers and fails when it's pushed up against real world challenges. So whenever we have an inherent sense of, I'm confident, but if I get called out, then I feel completely worthless. That's how you know that there's a mask at play. The mask tells us that who we really are is unacceptable. And so, by faking ourselves, then we become acceptable, but we're not our true whole selves. And so that fake foundation will not survive real challenges. And that's when we spiral into our inadequacies. That's when we fall into different coping mechanisms like comparators and emotional shutdown and perfectionism, things that we're going to be talking about in the next few days. So when we feel like we have to perform, that's an indication that a mask is at play. When we feel the need to perform, that's when we know a mask is at play. And that need to perform is exhausting. That need to perform is keeping us from being authentic to ourselves, being authentic to the world in whatever way that looks like. I know authenticity is such a catchphrase right now, but it's true. Right? So coming back to our true selves, understanding the masks and the anatomy of the masks and understanding how it's manifesting in our lives and when we wear them and what situations we wear them and how we were taught that we had to wear them. This is kind of big work. It's important. And doing this work myself for the past 10 years, I can say that when you can start to really honor your true selves, including its limitations, you actually, that is bettering yourself. You actually become a fuller, better individual. Again, it's the crux of the self-development world. It's like when you can fully accept yourself, that's when you can change. When you can fully see yourself for all of who you are, being unafraid to look at your imperfections, that's when you start to really grow and change. But while you're operating from the premise that, self-development is about perfecting yourself, even to more holy standards, and not ever looking at the broken pieces within you, you're only inflating your masks. And eventually, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel that you're not quite in alignment, that congruency isn't there. So I want to break down real quick the 3 masks. Now, this is a very complex, broad topic that obviously I can't share all in my Facebook Live. So I want to get to the 3 masks and I want you to marinate on it. And like I said, for the next 3 days, we're going to deepen our understanding of the coping mechanisms that come from the masks. But yeah, I just want you to know that unfortunately I can't give the breadth of this information because it's just so complex and it's so good. And it's actually also very nuanced, right? Okay, so the mask self is a pretense, and it attempts to make nice and be acceptable because of the lower self tendencies that we have and how we've been taught that that's not acceptable. So we attempt to appear how we want to appear, this idealized self-image, or the ISI. And this is a strategy by which I try to accept myself and others, right? Even though I know underneath that I'm an awful person, that I'm bad, that I'm broken. Do you see how convoluted this mask is? So there are 3 main manifestations of the masks: the power mask, the love mask, and the serenity mask. And as I'm sharing each of these masks, I want you to sit with and think about where you have acted on any one of these masks last. We have a tendency to play all of these masks at different times in our lives, at different circumstances and moments. So it's not that we just have the one. We generally play with all 3. But for women, we have one that we play out particularly well. And I'll get to that one in a second. So the one of the masks is the power mask. And that's the mask that we put on to appear powerful and creative, that we put on to feel confident. But it's really a mock confidence, kind of like that fake confidence. And it appears to come out as I'm a workaholic to appear important, like I'm always busy. I'm much better than you because I have all this stuff going on. And of course, this mask compensates for feeling lack of power. Maybe it may be easier in this exercise too to think about people who you've seen wear the power mask. The leader of our free world has a huge power mask on, completely inauthentic, boisterous with his tweets. Makes himself bigger than he appears, makes himself more important than he appears. Yeah. So the next mask is the one that women tend to wear particularly well, and it's the love mask. Now, the love mask is inauthentic, resentful, unloving, and disconnected. So the traits of the love mask are submissive and people-pleasing and nice, right? You can sense that these people can't really create intimate connections, that they're nice to everybody, but it feels like that sickly sweet. Like you can tell that they're not really telling you what they think. This is when you say nice to other people without telling them that this is actually something you don't want to do. This is the love mask. And as you're sitting here, let's get real here. These are socially acceptable. It's socially acceptable for us to people please. So not only do we have these masks on because we want to appear nice and loving and we want to receive love, but we've also been taught that this is better than being selfish, angry, manipulative, and all the other distortions of the lower self. You see that? So it's easy for us to believe that actually being in a mask is of service to ourselves, when really the mask, what it truly hides is our divine spark, is our highest potential, is the true love, true power, and true serenity. Okay, so the final mask is the Serenity Mask. And this is the mask where you're in authentic serenity in order to appear secure and truth. A lot of spiritual bypassing happens in the Serenity Mask. So this mask is put on to compensate for feeling insecure and inadequate. And traits include withdrawing, needing to be right, knowing everything, being cool. So Serenity, imagine, is like, I don't really care. It doesn't matter what you do, when really you care a lot what you do, right? Like when you're in a fight with your partner, like, I don't care. But you know that if the partner chooses the wrong decision, that it's going to get all up in your heart and you're going to feel so hurt. This is the Serenity Mask. We're pretending that it doesn't matter when it really, really does. Can you feel and sense when you've been wearing these different masks? Because we all have. This is completely normal. And we've got to start to look at, why did I feel like I needed to wear the Serenity Mask or the love mask or the power mask in that situation? Where did I inherently feel powerless or feel unloving or feel resentful? What is here? It's about getting curious. The anatomy of the masks are really fascinating. This is a topic that we covered deeply in my Worthy Women Rise program. The doors are opening soon. But what I love about knowing the masks is that this is a direct arrow. This is a direct understanding to our worthiness wound. Because where we feel like we have to put on a show, where we feel like we cannot be our true authentic selves, odds are we've internalized some belief systems about how we are broken. So take a look in your own life. Start to think in your own life when you've been wearing these masks and how exhausting it is. It requires a lot of exertion of power. Now, the answer is more nuanced than just don't wear the mask. In fact, in many ways, we feel like the mask is necessary. And so taking down the mask without the proper tools, you just become, you can actually be very hurtful, right? Like this is when we're trying to erect new boundaries. And so we're not going to be people pleasing anymore. So the first instance that we get to not be people pleasing and someone asks us to do something and we slam the door in their face because we don't actually know how to say no and be in our boundaries in a way that's kind and clear. So we yell at them like, how dare you ask me to do something for you, right? We get all whatever, right? So we don't want to just drop the mask. It's not quite that simple, but what we do definitely want to start doing is noticing when we wear the masks and notice how it's ultimately not serving us. We feel like it should serve us. We feel like if we wear the masks, then we'll feel confident, then we'll feel self-expressive, then we'll feel like we fit in. But really the cost of that is our authenticity and our connection with our divine spark, our true connection to something much deeper than ourselves, something that's much actually holy and fulfilling and incredible. I know that if you spend some time in inquiry, asking yourself, where these masks play out, you're going to have some big aha moments. And you're going to realize this is why I'm having such a difficult time in this particular area of my life. This information alone is absolutely revolutionary, because we start to see all of the ways that we've lied to ourselves about who we truly are. There's so many traits that we have that are completely skewed, that aren't actually who we are. We're not inherently people pleasing. We're not inherently putting ourselves above our own needs. We don't inherently do that. We do that because we've been taught to do that. So it's not that you are broken because you have the masks, right? We've been talking about this the past few days. It's not that you are inherently broken. This is the system that we live in. This is the world that we live in. And if we want to change the system, we have to first look at how we've been indoctrinated with that, like with that broken belief system, and start to do something about it. I come to you today to talk about overcoming comparators for good. I want to share my thoughts on why we feel this incessant need to compare ourselves to others, what comparators actually is. It's not just about comparing yourself to others, and how we can begin to navigate the conversation of comparators in a way that feels nourishing to us instead of judgmental and hypercritical, like the usual ways that we address the deeper challenges that we have within us. So comparators is not just about comparing yourself to others, and the energy feels slightly different. Comparing yourself to others would be like driving down the street, seeing a house and being like, wow, that house is so much bigger than my house, or wow, that house is so much smaller than my house. That's a comparison. You're making a judgment about someone's living situation and you're comparing it to your living situation, right? Just as an example. So comparing yourself to others is something we do constantly. It's part of our brain. We talked about judgment before. Knowing how you relate to other individuals is part of our biology. It's just how we function. So there's nothing inherently wrong with comparing. In fact, much of our survival instinct comes from knowing how you stand amongst everybody else. So again, comparison is not the problem. Where it gets tricky, where it gets challenging, is when comparison leads to comparators. And the reason why I call it comparators is because it almost feels like an impulsive need to compare to other people. It feels like you can't help it. It's not something that you choose to do. At least you don't feel like you have a choice. It feels like something deep within you is driving you to obsess over what other people are doing, so that you get validation of your insignificance, of your unworthiness. You see that? It's like you hunt for information that will confirm what you already know, which is you're unworthy, you're worthless, you shouldn't be on this planet, you shouldn't be taking up space. So it's almost like our worthiness wound is creating a compulsion within us to confirm its existence. And when we fall into comparators, when we fall into obsessing over how everybody else is doing it and you're not doing it, it's very easy to then feel like, what's the point? Right? And in that sense, the worthiness wound wins, because then you're more likely to stay quiet, stay small, not take up space, not go after what you want, et cetera, et cetera. You can see how comparators stems directly from the worthiness wound, and they perpetuate themselves. They spiral into themselves, and it's that space where once we fall into that abyss of comparing ourselves to others, it feels almost impossible to get out. And then, of course, we add that second layer, that second arrow, as they say in the Buddhist tradition, of self-judgment, where then we're judging ourselves for falling into comparators. I want to share my own journey of comparators. This is actually something that I know a lot about, because this is one of the main ways that the worthiness wound manifests in my life. And the reason why I know that comparators can feel so entrenched in our being is because for many of us, it goes a lot deeper than just wanting to compare yourself to other people to feel like shit. When we are children, we have an instinctual need to be mirrored and reflected in order to have a sense of who we are. Again, this is all biology. There is a theory called, or not a theory, a psychological construct called the attachment theory that speaks in how, as children, we have a deep need to feel attached to our caregivers for our own security. And when we can develop when we have that secure attachment, we develop and grow into securely attached adults. Unfortunately, for the majority of us, we do not have secure attachment as children. We grew up in insecure attachment. And there's a few specific types of insecure attachment that we won't cover here. But when we are growing up and we are not reflected and not mirrored by our parents, the love and consistency that we need, that reliability, right? That mirror of I'm coming to you, I need you, oh, you're here for me. That teaches me my own needs. That teaches me who I am. When we don't have that, it's very easy for us to grow into adults and believe that the power lies within other people. That the power lies within, if other people are doing this, it gives us this inherent permission for us to be who we are. It's a little complicated, but what I'm trying to get at is our insecure attachment drives us to find validation in other people to give us a secure attachment we never got as children. So when we look at it from that lens, comparitis is not just about the compulsive need to compare. It's actually driven by a deeper psychological need to be reflected. And so what we're doing when we're looking at other people is not inherently to compare. It's inherently to find a mirror. It's almost like we're looking at other people to find permission for us to be ourselves. And I'm curious if this lands with you. I want you to really think about this and think about how that may be true for you. This is certainly true for me. When I'm finding in myself in that spiral of compulsion of needing to compare, it's not just because I'm curious what other people are doing and then I spiral. It's that I have a deep desire to look at the lives of other people as a permission slip for my own existence. The problem is that while that intention comes from a good place, the ultimate consequence is that we're giving away our power to other people. Right? We're letting other people dictate our own permission. And we find this not just in comparitis, but in needing validation. Right? Oftentimes we talk about the love language being words of affirmation, but where's the line between needing other people to love us in a way that just keeps validating us, right? So we're losing our power versus affirming us, which is validating our own power that is inherent within us, right? So we've got to start looking at the ways that we have found somehow cultivated the psychological need to compare, not just to see what other people are doing, but because we don't know who we are and we need other people to dictate that for us. This is something I've been navigating a lot. And the good news is, by understanding the worthiness wound, by understanding our attachment, by understanding our deeper defense mechanisms that we developed from childhood, we can start to unhook ourselves from needing to hook into other people's power source for our own power. If you imagine that every time you compare yourself to other, you're actually hooking your plug of power into someone else's vortex. There is a way that we can begin to unhook, that we can unplug from their source and plug into our source or plug into a greater source. And the good news is, when we can do this, what happens is then we can bring our comparitis back to its normal function, which is to help us thrive in society by knowing how to compare and judge others, not from a place of separation and unworthiness, but from a sense of this is just what our brain does. And it doesn't mean anything bigger about who we are and our work in the world. So overcoming comparitis is absolutely deeply connected to our worthiness wound. And that's good news, because now we can do something about it. Thank you for listening to Reclaim the Podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of Thais Sky and her guests to the show. The content of this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental disorder.